Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. My name is Carisha Hyde Parker, Learning Operations Specialist here at MPI, and welcome to MPI's 2019 webinar series. Before we get started, I would like to point out a few features that you can use during the webinar. That is chat, also Q&A, and raise your hand located at the bottom of the screen. The best webinars are the ones where everyone uses the chat window to share their best practices and their own experiences. The chat feature will allow us to communicate for the duration of the webinar. To chat with all panelists and attendees, make sure to click on the To field and choose All Panelists and Attendees. When you click on chat, the chat window will appear. If you are in full screen mode, the chat window will appear where you can move it around your screen. If you're not in full screen mode, the chat window will appear on the right. For now, just say hi to everyone from wherever you're from. You can use the raise your hand feature to indicate that you need assistance. And if you want, you can also ask your questions for our presenter at any time in the Q&A box, or you can put them in the chat area at any time. Our presenter is a powerful, internationally known speaker, trainer, author, consultant, and president of Rossetti Enterprises, Inc., www.rosemariespeaks.com. She speaks to and consults with meeting professionals to help them create a welcoming, inclusive environment to ensure that they exceed requirements mandated by the venue and the meeting organizer for inclusion and diversity. Having been paralyzed from the waist down with a spinal cord injury, she speaks from her wheelchair, sharing her own dramatic personal story. She presents to audiences throughout the U.S. and beyond as a recognized expert on inclusive design. She has also earned recognition for her home, the Universal Design Living Laboratory, that is the top-rated universal design home in North America on www.udll.com. Please help me welcome President of Rossetti Enterprises, Inc., Dr. Rosemarie Rossetti.
Well, thank you, Carisha. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you today. I have a program that will help you to save time, to reduce your stress, and to have more inclusive meetings for people with disabilities. My program is very heartfelt and comes from personal experience, as I am in a wheelchair and go to a lot of conferences as a speaker as well as an attendee. You're going to see the world from my perspective. I've organized today's program with one governing statement, and that's for you to have thoughtful planning as you accommodate all the guests and invite people through inclusive design. The chapters are 3. The first one is Roll With Me. We're going to go through the Fairfield Inn here in Columbus, Ohio, where I live. I was there just a few weeks ago, and I want to show you what that experience is like so that you can understand from my wheels what it's like going to a public place where there might be a meeting or an event. The next chapter is Leading with an Inclusive Mindset. That has to do with attitude and perceptions. And the final is about expanding your customer base. As we look at the program, Roll With Me, let me take you into this experience that I had here at the Fairfield Inn. This is my wheelchair accessible van. It's a Honda Odyssey. It is equipped with a ramp that comes out of the side. As many of you know, the parking lots all have accessible spots, and they have signs there that you can see that has the international symbol of handicap. So this is an accessible parking area. It's near the front door. You'll see that there are spaces for van accessible, and those are 11 feet wide. So they've got that accessible aisle that is 5 feet wide. And now you can understand why I need that space as the ramp comes out and I roll down and I need that space as that transition. You'll also see the pavement has some truncated domes. These are very helpful for someone with a visual impairment. As they're walking, they can feel with their canes that there's going to be a change in grade or a change from the parking lot onto the sidewalk. So these are there for the visually impaired. It's a wonderful thing to look for when you're doing your site inspections. So come along with me as if you were doing a site inspection at the Fairfield Inn. I'm now making the transition, and you can see there's a slight grade to the sidewalk, but it's very slight and easy for me to navigate from my parking space right up to the front door. As I go into the front door, it's an automatic opening. Both doors open, and they're open for a long period of time, allowing me full access, so I don't have to worry about someone's going to have to open the door for me or pushing a button. They are just electronic. Also, notice they have um, a place here for you to wipe your feet or for the wheelchair to get a little cleaner on the wheels, but no one's going to trip over that rug. Many of the entrances I've been at have some type of an area rug, and they oftentimes get in the way of the doors, or they can be askew, and somebody could actually trip on those entrances. This one was very wide, easy for me to get in. The flooring is hard surface. It's a luxury grade vinyl and a low pile on the carpeting on that center area in the reception area. They also had the walk-off mat that I'm actually positioned on here, that it's very flat and it's going to stay down. Notice this hard surface flooring makes it so much easier for rollability. A little closer view now that I'm with the receptionist. The design of the counter was wonderful in that it is totally inclusive. For me in the wheelchair, I've got eye contact with the staff member here at the front desk. If he asks me to sign a document, it's at a really ready height for me. It's great for someone who is short. It's great for someone who is tall. So I'm accommodated, and other people are accommodated too with the two heights of the counter. As we're rolling now into the back, you can see the dining room. Let's take a look here at the placement of the chairs and table. I found them very well spaced so that I could get around and select the table of my choice as I went into the dining room. And again, the carpeting was a very low pile, hardly any difficulty for me to roll on. So they didn't have a lot of padding underneath it. Many of the spaces I've been in have too thick a padding and too thick of a carpet, and it takes a lot for me to push throughout the facility. I then went into the food area where they have the breakfast in the morning, and I was happy to see the under-counter refrigerator was easy to access. The food stations and the counters were easy, as well as the water station. So wonderful placement. Again, as you're doing your check-ins, take a look at some of these areas to see what improvements the facility needs to make to accommodate all your guests. I then went over to the bar, and I was very pleased to see that there were two heights on the bar counter. They had a low height with plenty of knee space underneath. As you can see, I'm rolling right underneath this lower surface. Then they had the taller bar with the high bar stools. Not only is this good for someone with a wheelchair, but there are many people who just physically can't climb on a bar stool, or they find that it's very uncomfortable for the circulation in their legs, and they would prefer to be in a shorter chair or stool. So in this case, someone could just simply reposition some of the dining chairs over to the bar at the low counter. When I started looking for the restroom, the signs were easy for me to spot. And then I started to open the door to find out, is this door easy to open? They also had it signed with the international symbol showing it was an accessible stall. They also had lever handles, which make that easier. An improvement would be to put the push button door here. There are some people who are in scooters, and they have a difficult time navigating opening that door by themselves and navigating to get the scooter inside the restroom as well as exiting. So we need to put power on the doors to the restroom inside and out. Leading with the inclusion mindset is my second chapter. And as we understand including people, as this vision here is with 2 people in wheelchairs, we need to look at all disabilities, those with hearing loss, those with mental disabilities, those with intellectual disabilities, those with vision disabilities. What we're finding is when we have a more inclusive environment, and attracting more people, more members, having more productive meetings, and having different perspectives. It's all a good thing to have people with disabilities being included in all of your events and meetings. So let's look at the inclusive mindset and what that means. The first piece I'd like to bring out is this research that was released May 7th of 2019. Many of you are not aware this report is out there. This is from MPI, and you can see the title on the screen and the cover. The actual research was done by New York University's Jonathan Tisch Center of Hospitality. The research was done in 2018. The interviews were done with experts, and I am one of the experts quoted in this piece of research. They also interviewed MPI members. 1,087 of them had responses. So this is a member research component, as well as some pointers and some tips from the 16 experts. The actual research report is a PDF that you can get at my website, rosemariespeaks.com. And so you'll look at what they found were the barriers to planning inclusive event experiences. And maybe some of the research results will surprise you. The results found that 31% of the respondents said that they are actually responding to guest expectations. Well, that made sense as they're looking at who is planning to come to their events. They're looking at what their guests are expecting. The other surprising piece is people are looking at complying with legal requirements. And of course, in this country, it's the Americans with Disabilities Act. In other countries, there are other laws and regulations, as well as in certain provinces, certain states, and municipalities. So the legal requirements have to be followed. The other piece of research is that 19% of them indicate that it helps with business results and enhances the bottom line. And this is the return on investment by having more inclusive events. 40% of the population said there are gaps in information and knowledge about how to provide inclusive events. And that's where you're going to have the cutting edge today. By being on this 1-hour interview, I'm hoping that I'm shortening your gap in information and knowledge, then that you come away with some information from the notes you're taking, as well as a handout, a resource guide that I've created for you that you'll be able to get later on in the webinar. I also found this magazine. It came out in March of 2019, and I was particularly attracted to the headline, Diversity and Inclusion on the Rise, not only for your guests, but also to bring in speakers that have disabilities, to bring in speakers from diverse populations so that you can have different perspectives and viewpoints, so that not all of your speakers and presenters come from the non-disabled population, but make an effort to include people with disabilities as you're bringing in speakers. The Americans with Disabilities Act passed in 1990. You can resource that at ada.gov, where you can find all of the rules and regulations regarding public spaces. And that requirement, therefore, applies to all your hotels, all your restaurants, all your meeting facilities, all your restrooms, all your parking lots. That's where you're going to find the actual details about what you need to do to comply for your legal responsibilities. Let us now look at another chapter, looking at leading with an inclusive mindset in terms of how you think about inclusion and your frame of mind. It's
Excuse me,
my,
Dr. Rossetti.
yes.
We have a couple of questions before we move on to the next chapter.
Wonderful, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yes. So we have curious about the restroom. The space looks like it is not easy to move about in a scooter. How wide was it?
The doorways need to be at least 36 inches with 32 inches of clearance as you're going in. Now, everybody's wheelchair and scooter is going to be different based on the size of the person's wheelchairs and scooters, but I've typically seen doors that are 36 inches wide, and the ADA is looking at usually a 32-inch clearance as that thing is open. Thank
It,
you.
yes, and so the other question becomes, another question came in, and once in the restroom, what was the navigable space?
I'm looking at full space to navigate as a 5-foot turning diameter. So whenever I'm in a restroom, I want to be able to have 5-foot circles throughout that for navigation, and plenty of aisle space and a wonderful stall that has, again, that 36-inch wide door and at least a 30 by 48 space to go in and to maybe back out, if not the full 5-foot turning distance. And you'll see illustrations at ada.gov for the details on those accessible restrooms. They also need to have those grab bars in place and appropriate toilet positioning by those grab bars.
And so here's one more question at this time. Please address what to do when a hotel's registration or check-in counter is not the appropriate height. And how was the desk person trained to work with PWDs?
I don't know how the staff was trained. I'm not privy to that information. But when those counters are not tall enough and I approach them, what I do is go to the end of the counter, and they usually get my nonverbal that I can't see them. I can't have a conversation. So usually there's an end to that counter, and I will go to that end, or I will signal to the person, "Can you come around front and bring a clipboard with you?" And so we have that dialogue away from that registration if it's just one-on-one.
Okay, one quick question before we move on. Does 5 inches apply to scooters?
Does 5 feet
Oh, I'm
apply?
sorry. Yes.
5 feet may not be big
Apply.
enough. We may need to go 6 or 7. Again, because of commercial spaces, you might want to consider going with the larger spaces on the 6-foot turning radius because of the scooters. They're larger and they need more space. Anything else come up?
No, that's it for now. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. As we consider disability, it's going to touch everybody's life eventually as we live long enough. Our limitations will become apparent as our vision changes, our hearing changes, our mobility changes. Many of you have family members or maybe perhaps yourself that has a disability, either visible or invisible. And so it does touch all of our lives as life happens. In my case, I was instantly disabled when a tree suddenly fell on me. And who would have thought that on that date, June 13th of 98, that I would be life flighted with a spinal cord injury. But things happen, oftentimes from an illness or aging, and sometimes from accidents. What happens then is we often have a blind spot because we're just not aware. We don't know what to look for as we're going through a site visit. And I want to bring up some of the blind spots that possibly won't be blind to you anymore. Things that you just weren't aware of. It was unconscious for you that you had a disability bias, but thinking about what would it be like if you were disabled. So since some of you are not disabled and you haven't had an experience in a scooter or wheelchair, can you have that experience? Can you borrow a wheelchair or scooter that is available for your site visits and take that around? Now, I would like to have someone with you if this is your first time, so it's a safe environment because you're not used to using a wheelchair or a scooter, and I don't want anything bad happening to you. But what better way to learn than to actually be in the wheels and see what it's like and see where the problems might be so that you're not making assumptions anymore And again, some of the disabilities are not visible. So you might have an unconscious disability bias. Some language. This one I catch all the time. People write in their articles, people's websites indicate this, or just spoken language. They say, oh, this person is wheelchair bound. And think about this visual. You're not bound in a wheelchair. I had a little kindergartner once at a presentation ask me, Rosemary, do you sleep in your wheelchair? I mean, she really literally thought I was wheelchair bound and couldn't go to bed. Please use other language. It's a person who uses a wheelchair. It's not a wheelchair-bound person, okay? This is people first language, and you can go on the internet and just type people first language and get more information about it. But this is one that really is a pet peeve for many people who use wheelchairs. They're not bound by their wheelchair. I look at my wheelchair as my work vehicle. The other is people would prefer to be called people with a disability versus a person that's disabled or handicapped. It's a people first language. I have something called paraplegia, so I'm a person with paraplegia versus calling me a paraplegic. So it's a subtle difference in language. The other one is people without a disability, don't call them normal people. I mean, people with disabilities are normal too. So try to stop using the language when you're describing a person without a disability. Just say it's a person without a disability. It's very easy. The other one that is a very subtle one, the parking space is accessible parking. It's not handicap parking. The restroom is accessible restroom. It's not a handicap restroom. Again, a subtle difference to help you with your blind spots and an unconscious effort to help you be more conscientious about your language. I think it's going to go a long way. Now, on disability etiquette, a lot of people ask me about this. They go, should I be pushing around a person in a wheelchair because I think that they need my help? And my answer is do not put your hand on someone's wheelchair without asking if they want you to push them. One of my speaker friends is a little person. She's only 4 foot, and she also uses a wheelchair. She has broken bones in her body because of brittle bone disease. And she has told me time and time again, she wants no one to ever push her because if she loses her balance and falls to the ground, there will be many bones broken instantly. So don't push anyone without asking if they need you to help them. The other is don't lean on their wheelchair or hang one of your items on their wheelchair. That is rude. And the other one, this happens so much when I'm networking at events. They'll come up and want to talk to me, and especially someone who is really tall, because I'm like straining my neck. I'm only 4'2" in a seated position. And if I'm talking to a 6'4" person all afternoon in a networking, my neck and shoulders hurt. So they feel like they should kneel down and talk with me. I think it's uncomfortable for them, and I feel that why don't we just go move ourselves to another place in the networking situation where there is an actual chair for them to sit in, so we're eye to eye. I just feel awkward when someone wants to kneel down to talk with me. They're going to be very uncomfortable and have dirt on their knees likely. So disability etiquette continues. If you have someone who is visually impaired or blind, please identify yourself as you're talking to that person. Don't just start talking, say hi, some kind of greeting so that you can identify yourself with your name. And then if they're with another companion or they have an interpreter with them, if this person is deaf, you need to talk to the person, not to the interpreter or the companion that's with them. And then again, don't assume they need help. Ask before you offer help. Human rights, that's what it's about. The Americans with Disabilities Act came as a civil rights movement. It is about leveling the playing field, especially as we're looking at public spaces, so that people can go wherever they want and have equal rights and equal access to what all kinds of activities, all kinds of locations, and human dignity is at stake. To understand inclusion, you need to understand what is exclusion. It's like having a big sign that says, do not enter, or this locked gate. They can't get in, they can't participate, they feel embarrassed, they feel like they're pointed at, and they don't know what to do in the situation. So please include people more by heeding my advice today. Carisha, is there any other comments from the audience as we go to another chapter?
We have make sure people know to have seating at a networking event, not just high tops.
Absolutely. That's wonderful they brought that up. Any other comments or questions? All right, we'll move on. I want to share with you some of the situations that do create architectural barriers, physical barriers, and some unsafe conditions. And um, that last item is, of course, important about networking with some lower chairs and tables. This is a scene that was captured on film. My husband is the tall man in the white shirt and black tie. This is Mark. We were at a banquet event, a table for 6 of us. And as you see the sash that I'm wearing, at that time in 2004, I was Miss Wheelchair Ohio. And, you know, that was a long time ago. But surprisingly, I still fit into my crown. And so I just wanted to show you the spaciousness of the table. I had plenty of room for my legs. There was not a table leg underneath. The tablecloths weren't really low to the ground, so I didn't get my caster wheels caught in it as we navigated our dinner at this particular event. I looked at this particular photograph and wanted to bring that to your attention. We need at least 36-inch aisles, and that includes from the wall space and between tables so that people can navigate. It is so embarrassing when I go into a restaurant and it's not set up with adequate aisles, and people are in the middle of eating, and then the greeter that is now seating me has to ask these people to get up during dinner and move so that I can get to my table. That's just too embarrassing that people have to move in order to let me go sit somewhere. So we need some more space between tables and between walls for adequate access. I like this restaurant scene, and there's a couple reasons. The shorter tablecloths is one, the adequate aisle space, and also that first chair in that front. I like the location of the table legs. I think I can roll right under there without any problem. Also, the table heights are good. So this is a wonderful image showing good placement where I could navigate between tables and get to a seat in the restaurant. On the other hand, this one was just ridiculous. There was no place in this setting where I could find anywhere that would be comfortable to roll under. So take a look at those events and looking at, do you have tables that are spaced appropriately so that you can accommodate people with scooters and wheelchairs? And don't put these tables in the back of the room all the time. Put them at various positions throughout the venue so that people can pick where they want to sit, not always in the back of the room. Now, some people will be bringing their service dog. So here is Suki. Suki needs a seat too. So Suki will be coming with the owner and they'll be coming to dining. So you need to make sure that Suki is accommodated also in a dining situation so that Suki won't be in the way of people stepping on the dog's paws. That is also the case when you're setting up your meeting rooms at convention centers. Be aware, many times it's this tight placement and you've got aisles in the middle. Where is a person in a wheelchair or scooter supposed to park? You need to remove 2 of these chairs, 2 of the aisles, so that you can have some space, like maybe a 3x3 or a 4x4 space to allow the people with scooters and their service dogs and people in wheelchairs to actually navigate on that center aisle and park somewhere on the end. Again, they should be able to select a seat if they want to go up front or they prefer to be in the back. So if they had to go to the restroom, they don't disturb people, or on one of the sides. For people with low vision who want to read lips, That's important to have some reserved seats up front. For people who are deaf and they're going to have the interpreter, have some seats up front for them so that they can see that interpreter and light that area for them. The other seat that I've been offered, and this is a humorous story, when I went to a hotel and I asked for the shower chair, they said they had no shower chair, so they brought me this milk crate. This is what they expected me to sit on in the shower instead of bringing me a shower chair. Now, you've all heard of hat head. This is when you put a hat on your head and all your hair is flattened down, and then when you take the hat off, you have a hat head. Well, could you imagine sitting on this milk crate? You're going to have waffle butt. I mean, this was not a dignified nor a safe solution, but that was the only solution they had. And it was just so embarrassing for me to go in there in my room as they brought me this little contraption and put it upside down. They put some towels on it and said, here, see if you can sit on this and take your shower. That is not accessible. This is an accessible shower with the padded seat, with the curbless shower. There's no way I'm going to have a problem transferring and rolling right in here and having grab bars and the vertical bar to adjust the handheld shower and a wonderful glass block letting in light plus a shower curtain. I mean, that's what hotels need to be doing, accessibility. When you have people coming and you have a large population that will be coming in wheelchairs and you know about it, for example, when I was in the Miss Wheelchair America pageant, Miss Wheelchair Ohio pageant, or recently I was attending a veterans affair where these were all disabled veterans at their conference. In that case, your parking lot needs a lot more accessible parking. So make sure that you have cordoned off more of the parking lot near the doors, either the front door, side doors, or back doors, and rope it off and put signage so when people do drive into the parking lot that you have put orange cones or some other marking with some signage directing them to additional parking so they aren't feeling like they were left out. The push buttons are appropriate. Many of the newer establishments are automatic, as we saw at the Fairfield Inn, but we do need to make these doors easy for people to open either automatically or the push buttons. Again, on your site visit, if push buttons are there, push them, see if they're operating. Don't assume anything on your site visits and include these in your checklists. Also on elevators, make sure they're working, make sure they're clean. A guest should not have to go into the kitchen and use a service elevator that's filthy dirty, or worse yet, it's a storage elevator where things are always in it. They need to change their patterns and make sure elevators are clean, accessible, and well marked so that the guests who need the elevators know where they are. They may need some guidance from volunteers to show them where their bank of elevators are in order to get to the venue. On food, this I took the other day at a grocery store that had a food service area. I could not read what the food items were and had to actually lift myself out of the wheelchair in order to read the signs. Granted, the signs did have the ingredients so that someone with food allergies or sensitivities or religious dietary laws would know what's in the food, but for me, it was totally inaccessible because it was just not a good height. They need to think that through again. When we look at buffets, thinking in terms of putting a chair up to the buffet and seeing if you could reach the items that are there for you, maybe having a person that is stationed there as a service coordinator, asking that your venue provide staff at all times during meal that will be there to accommodate anyone that has difficulty reaching food. And on placement, put it as low as you can, having serving lines on both sides and with plenty of space on both sides. I think it's a critical importance, especially if any of the items are hot and liquid, such as soups, chilies, and especially any beverage. It's very difficult. So have the staff trained to ask that person, may I help you in plating your food, asking them what food to put on the plate, and then carrying it and helping them find a seat so that they can be included with the rest of the guests. Now, here is a food display that I don't think I'm going to need any help in accessing this one. In fact, I don't think I even need a plate for this one. I could probably grab a donut when no one's looking and stuff the whole thing in my mouth and carry it off with me as I chew away to a table. But accessibility is important. And as we're looking at transportation to help get someone from the airport to the venue or from the convention center to their hotel, there are accessible vehicles that were built with the ramps in them, as well as the lift type of vehicle. So here's one that's a simple taxi service with a wheelchair accessible ramp that is built into the van. As I look at flooring, as I talked before, not all carpeting is alike. Not only do people in wheelchairs and scooters appreciate hard surfaces, but so do all people. So encourage anyone who is in the design field to take a real hard look at hard surface flooring rather than the luxury carpeting and thick padding. It does not do us justice. All right, let's see if there's something else as we move into the organizational subchapter. Carisha, anything coming up?
Yeah, so we have a recommendation. Paul Rad, or Radde, Rad's book, Seating Matters, at thrival.com, which has lots of options.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a question. Is your experience that one hotel brand over others are more accessible than others?
I don't need to comment on that. It just seems like the more modern, the better they are. It's not necessarily that one brand is consistently better. As you look at who is the largest brand name out there, I believe it's Marriott. And so, should Marriott be doing a better job because they are the biggest, and should they have the best designers? I can't say from my personal experience that I'm going to only go to this brand because I've always had great experiences. I've had better experiences on the newer locations. It seems like the newer they are, the more talented their interior design staff and more educated their staff is to do it right.
And we have a recommendation, another recommendation, and for elevators, all should see Zach Anner's Rainbow Bagel Quest, also for city accessibility.
Yes, that's a wonderful video. It's got some humor to it, watching a gentleman in a wheelchair in New York City try to navigate the city. Anything else?
That's it for right now.
All right, let's take a look at the planning process. You have a project team that you're working with. You're putting plans together. You've got checklists. You've got volunteers. Then you have to put budgets together to make sure that there is funding available for services that need to be provided, such as hiring an interpreter for a period of days or a full day. You need more than just one person. They get tired. So thinking in terms of the budget and putting your resources together and everything on paper and everything in the contract, all of that has to be done in advance. So you're planning for inclusion. You're not just winging it and making it up as people start arriving. You go, oh my gosh, this person who just came has a dog. What are we going to do? Where is the dog going to go to the bathroom? Oh, there's no place outside. What are we going to do inside? That bathroom relief station that needs to be there. Will the dog need a water bowl? Don't be surprised by who's coming. You should know in advance who's coming and what their needs are. And some planning is needed also if you're hiring speakers. So this was an event I attended. The actual client was in the construction business and made this ramp for me. Now they put the sides on it, the side rails, they put a little carpet on it. The stage wasn't that high. You can see in the picture that the ramp is appropriate, ADA compliance with a 1 in 12 slope, which means for every foot high a stage, you need 12 feet of ramp. Now, I was surprised when I saw the orange tape that they put on it that says, "Danger, do not enter." That was tape they had from the construction site, and so they carefully put it around the edges to remind me not to roll off of the stage. Now, I like some type of a marking, but this one was a very humorous surprise when I saw what they did. I also appreciate they put the table and chairs from the panel that was a panel speaking at the conference also. They pushed it all the way in the back, giving more stage room for me. And they also took that lectern and actually moved it off stage. They gave me a clip-on cordless microphone, and they gave me enough space on the stage so that I could roll around. Sometimes I get to the event, the ramp is awesomely short and steep, and there's no way I can get up without people pushing me. And then the stage is barely big enough just to sit in and lock my wheels. That doesn't do me any justice. This was a event that I attended with the ADA compliant ramp. Notice the stage is taller here, so they needed a longer ramp. And in order to accomplish this, they had several 90-degree turns. Now, this is an ADA compliant ramp with the handrails there also, as well as the edging so that I didn't roll off. So this, they did a good job. However, when the ramp was put in on rehearsal, we found that the slides couldn't be seen by people on that left side because the ramp handles were in the way. So we had to move some seating so that people weren't feeling like they had to look through the ramp handles in order to see the slides. So that was a last minute decision on the part of me and the meeting planners to say, well, we're not going to move the ramp. We can't take the rails off. So let's just move the seats and let those people be accommodated in another way. Also, look at the tape along the edge. Again, a safety factor so that I didn't roll off. And then they put the fern there also, another indicator so that I wouldn't accidentally roll off the stage. On the right side, they had steps. So people who wanted to come up and down off of the floor to the stage had the option if they wanted to come up the ramp or a set of stairs off to the side. This is a illustration of a stage that was 1 foot high, showing what a 12-foot ramp looks like. And in this case, this ramp could be used outdoors too, because it has the steel mesh on the bottom, and that would work if it was raining or snowing so that the ramp would not be slippery. And you should be able to rent ramps. They're very easy. Going online and finding a company nearby that does bring them, install them, take them out, they know what they're doing. So there's no excuse for you not having the appropriate ramp for your staging for speakers who are going to need that. Any other questions? We're at another little chapter here.
I don't have any questions right now.
All right, we'll continue. As you train your staff and volunteers, it's important to have strategies for emergencies. If your venue is on the second floor, how are you going to get people in wheelchairs out of the building without using the escalator or the elevator, just using the stairs? There are special chairs that are available to assist you that can be used by your volunteers to transfer someone from a scooter into an evacuation style chair and how to use that chair to get them downstairs. So you should find out if the venue has an evacuation chair on premises, and you should train staff in how to use it, and finding staff that want to be the volunteers, that are strong enough and capable enough to help in an emergency to get people from one floor down to a safe level. So train them in advance. Also, train your volunteers thinking about, again, asking before helping. Some people don't want to have the door open for them. They feel they're very independent. They don't want any special treatment. And so they're offended when people open the doors. In my case, I am never offended. If somebody sees that they could go in ahead of me and open the door, I will save my shoulders every time to let someone else go in first if it's not an automatic door or a push button door. But please ask and train your volunteers to ask before assuming that they need help. The other is this communication and information. And I want to bring up a praise for MPI for the World Education Congress. I am going to speak there and I'm going to attend the entire conference. This is a screenshot from the registration form that's online. So what they're asking for is anyone who is planning to attend, if they would like to be a meeting ambassador, where they're going to pair you up with another attendee to help them navigate. They're asking for volunteers. I thought this was a great idea so that if anyone wants to be a mentor, especially to a person with a disability, this would be great pairing to say having somebody available to occasionally check in and see if they could help. But what's more important on this registration is this big open-ended question. And I was able to then type in there that I use a wheelchair for mobility. Anyone else that has a physical need can type in what they need so that the MPI planning department knew that people were coming that had special needs. So I applaud MPI. I give them gold stars because about 2 or 3 weeks after I registered, I got a phone call from an MPI staff member, and she kept asking me, what do I need to have a wonderful, inclusive event? Am I bringing my own wheelchair? Will there be someone with me? Will I need help getting from the convention center to the Marriott where I'll be staying, and the transportation service that will be provided at the end of the day and the scheduling of that? They also connected me with the transportation company, who has now reached out to me with their cell phone, their email, and they are reaching out to help me at the Toronto event to transport me from the convention center to my hotel. So having a conversation with each person who has registered, who's indicating they have a physical disability. It also could be for intellectual or mental. There's all sorts of ways to ask that question. And when you see the handout that I will reference at the end of this session, you'll see a lot more detail, as well as when you read the report from MPI. There's a lot of expertise from those 16 people that were interviewed. You're going to learn a lot from that report. This was one of the occasions where the audience participants at this table were deaf, and we had an interpreter. And so we need to realize where that interpreter stands and how the deaf can be very close by. It was off-putting for me the first time I had an interpreter because I'm used to having eye contact with my audience. And in this case, none of them were looking at me during the whole presentation. And it was like, oh my gosh, that's right. They're watching the interpreter, not me. And so I had to figure this out and understand that there's no way I can make eye contact with that table. Just make eye contact with the rest of the audience. So I learned a lesson at that point. A conference I went to in October of 2018 was the Leading Age Annual Conference, Philadelphia. I was speaking at this conference, and they, for the first time, had this communication device using the Amazon Alexa portal. It was an amazing opportunity to go to these stations throughout this large convention center. This was a big deal, a big conference. You could go to these kiosks and ask Alexa questions like, where is the nearest accessible restroom? Where is Rosemary Rossetti speaking and at what time? And I started talking with the developer of this afterwards, saying, could you program this for other people with disability that might have specific needs? Like, where is the relief station for my service dog? I mean, there's so much possibility now with the technology that's out there to communicate with people, not only those with disabilities, but everyone at large conferences. So I thought this is a cutting edge communication device at large conferences. My next section is about expanding your customer base. Carisha, if I check in, is there anything that's come through at this point?
Not right now.
Okay. What you're looking for is filling your seats. You're looking at expanding your membership. You're looking at the maximum audience participation. And so that's what inclusive design does, is helping you to build your customer base, build your membership by having that inclusivity for people with disabilities. So here's the question you need to think about as you look at the question on the screen. What's going to happen if you don't have inclusive meetings or events? What are the consequences? What do you stand to lose? So thinking about that, I started to also come up with my own conclusions, and here they are. Could you, in fact, jeopardize your job because you didn't do a good job of planning? Could your company or organization end up with a terrible reputation because of the way you did disservice to the people who were there and were furious and frustrated and emotionally distraught? They are frustrated, and who are they going to tell? Everybody. And then it gets out, and then they go on social media, and then they start calling the newspapers and the TV stations, and suddenly you're getting really bad reviews, bad press, bad PR, and then people won't buy from you. They won't attend your events anymore. If it's a serious infraction, they're going to go to the ADA and they're going to file a formal complaint against your business or your association. It could go to mediation. It could be settled without a lawsuit, without any fines, but it could go all the way to a fine and a major problem for you. So those are the consequences. So for my call to action, you've got to look at committing yourself to creating inclusive environments for all participants. You've got to have an intentional choice rather than taking a risk of an unintentional harm. As we looked at that blind spot, oftentimes the meeting planner just doesn't know enough. There's just too big a gap in knowledge. They haven't been exposed to education. They've been not around people with disabilities. They've never had the responsibility of an event for a person with a disability. So please take responsibility to make sure that you have included everyone. And realizing that some people could be excluded, so do what's needed to change things. As I looked at some of the MPI planning documents that I just downloaded from the internet, I was very surprised that on those planning documents, there was very little discussion or checklist items that would be appropriate for people with disabilities. There might be something on there about hiring an interpreter, but there's very little about seating for networking, about leaving space for people that need a little extra space in the meeting venue. So whoever is responsible for revising checklists and revising general resources should be putting more in there to make some changes to your checklist. You've got the power. You're going to go around whatever meeting you're planning, what's on your desk now, whatever contract, as you're meeting with managers, as you're meeting with service staff and concierge, you are the one that's going to make or break this conference. So what are you going to do with this power? To commit to doing something. This is the document that I am giving you as the handout for today. Please share it with others. Please share the replay of this webinar. It will be at the MPI website, probably starting tomorrow. This is an 8-page resource that I put together, and it was my best expertise put into one document of the 5 meeting professional musts to include people with disabilities. So go to a simple website we've created, planforinclusion.com, and all you do is type in your name and email, and immediately you'll get a free PDF download of this wonderful resource that really revisits what I've talked about today, but goes far beyond that. I have to thank all the people I've interviewed and all the articles and resources that I've gathered in order to put this particular document together. I also speak on other topics. I have a program that's motivational in tone and theme on coping with change and dealing with adversity and having resilience in your life. So if you're looking for a speaker, consider bringing me in. I do keynotes and breakouts. I also speak to the hospitality industry about universal design, inclusive design. And as Carisha mentioned in my bio, I am known for universal design in the housing sector. I do speak about inclusion in home design also for the professional designers as well as consumers and those who would like to know how to make your home livable for a lifetime with safety and comfort and accessibility in mind. I am available to speak at your chapter. I've got a couple now on my calendar. If your chapter is looking for the presentation from today, I'd be happy to entertain a discussion. Either send me an email, rosemary@rosemariespeaks.com, or give me a call and we'll start putting that on my calendar. I speak at large conferences also. We've got lots of demo videos, so if you'd like to see me in action, go to rosemariespeaks.com and you'll see those demo videos. This is my home. If you'd like to learn about the Universal Design Living Laboratory, we have a virtual tour and video tour. Just go to udll.com and you'll be able to learn more about the home that my husband and I built and live in. So, those of you going to the World Education Congress, you want to meet with me because I will be there the whole time. I am allowed to take pictures of my experience at the entire conference. So come and get a selfie with me because that picture may end up in my presentation. They have saved me for the last day, the last half hour. This program is power-packed and is going to reveal not only the comments that I've made today, but more particularly how my experience was in Toronto. So come and meet with me in Toronto and please come to this presentation. I think they've saved the best for last. So Carisha, we have concluded my program. Let's see if there's anything else to wrap it up today.
Okay, well, we have a couple of questions. And so someone was asking about, I know you mentioned the MPI registration for WEC physical need, and they're asking physical need only or others questions asked. And I believe that the registration does ask for food allergies or dietary restrictions, as well as anything other that you can
Yes,
fill in.
yes, they do. Yes, they do. They have those questions to follow. I just did a screen grab for the physical component since I am focused on my presentations, mostly on the people with disabilities rather than the food allergies and sensitivities. But yes, that was a part of the registration.
Okay. Then there's another question. Are you referring to RFPs or what planning documents?
I have looked at the MPI planning documents on how to plan meetings and events that I just downloaded, and that's the reference that I'm concerned with. But your RFPs should also have some of these requirements in them. As you're writing RFPs, what is it that you want the venue to support? What is it that you will not give in on?
And it just came in. Are those the same as the Apex documents?
I am not familiar with Apex documents. I'm not in the industry. I'm just starting to learn about your industry. So if somebody else can go on the chat and give their opinion of the Apex documents or give more information to those who are listening, I don't know them.
Okay, thank you. Also, a question about the evacuation chairs that you mentioned earlier. If the venue does not offer those chairs when you ask, should you request them as just as a potential just in case something may happen, you have them available?
Absolutely.
Have you
Yes,
experienced anything?
that venue needs to have them at all costs. I mean, investing in an evacuation chair versus a life that's lost. Just have them on the property and train staff how to use it. And if you're having volunteers, I would suggest training some volunteers too. There's lots of reasons for having to leave a building. Unfortunately, these days with shooters and crises that occur, bombings, there are many reasons, not just fire emergencies, but we need to plan for what's going on in the world today to get people out if they need to get out quickly.
Okay, I think, is that by law that they have the chairs? Most hotels don't even have wheelchairs now.
I don't know what ADA has in their regulations. Is there anyone here that can give the website for looking at those requirements? Is that an option or a requirement? That is something I need to know the answer to.
Okay, that's something that we would need to look up.
I would think if you went on it's a website right now and did a search, if anyone has time, are wheelchair evacuation chairs mandatory for a hotel? Let's just type that in and I bet you'll find a reference, and that's what I plan to do. Or you can go to the vendor who sells the evacuation chairs. I bet they've got the legislation there if it is required, or call them. You
Okay.
know, that's what I like. I like to ask a lot of questions. Sometimes I don't know the answers, but if I can ask the right questions, I usually know that the answers are out there with the searches on the internet. So that's my job, is to ask the right questions to cause you to think. And then as you're starting to think, you'll have your own questions and you'll know where these resources are. It's not hard to type in a question and suddenly you get on the internet the answers that you're looking for.
So true. So true. So do you have any last comments, last final thoughts before we wrap up and end the webinar today?
Well, I thank you for attending. Please tell others on your teams about this webinar if you felt it was of value, so that other people have an opportunity to learn from it. And if you have information that you want to share with me, you have more questions you want to share with me, my email is open to you as soon as you get off this webinar. It's just rosemary@rosemariespeaks.com. Feel free to keep the dialogue going. I'm still learning, and I'd like to learn more so that I can transfer what I learn as I speak around the country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for attending our webinar today. And thank you so much to you, Dr. Rosemary Rossetti, for such a valuable information on on accommodating people with disabilities and at meetings and events. I know that I've learned a few tips that I can take with me on things that I didn't know. So hopefully everyone else did too. Just want to let you know, everyone, that an on-demand version of this webinar will be added to the MPI Academy website. We will manually update your clock hours to your MPI member account, as well as your to the Events Industry Council to update your clock hours with the email address that you've registered with and that you have on file if you have an account there. As a backup, you can use your certificate of attendance or your registration confirmation with the session description to self-report your clock hours. If you are listening to this webinar on demand, you can self-report your clock hours using your certificate of attendance or the registration confirmation along with the session description to self-report. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us today, and have a wonderful weekend. Goodbye.